everyone, and welcome to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. We thank you again for your time. We hope you and yours are well, and we hope we're getting closer and closer to getting back to normal. Here's what we can promise you. A great show again today. We have the brothers Stevens with us. Hall of Famer Gary, his brother Scott. They have won more races than any brother jockey combination in history. Over 10,000 races between them. Scott winning his 5,000th just a few weeks ago. So Gary and Scott Stevens, they have great stories, a great relationship, and just wonderful guys. I've known them for years, and so they'll be joining us in just a few moments. Joining us now, we have on lead guitar, Scott Hall, on bass, Ben Chaffins, and our researcher extraordinaire, Mr. Thomas Kenny. Guys, how's everyone? Healthy and safe, I hope, right now.
Oh, yeah.
Doing well so far.
You know, we're talking about families, obviously, on this show with Gary and Scott Stevens. And just doing some research, Thomas, you know, there's been a lot of brother combinations in other sports to find real success with two brothers. It's happened. It's kind of rare, though, but it's interesting to look back on some of these.
Yeah, absolutely, Kenny. Like you said, it is rare, but it happens more often than you might think. You know, going all the way back to, you know, some of the older sports in boxing, I'm going to butcher this name. I've looked it up and I'm still going to butcher it. But the Klitschko brothers.
Yeah, the Klitschko brothers.
Vitaly and Vladimir.
Yeah. Wow, that's good. You know what? I should have known that right off the top of my head. Yeah, I've done a few boxing matches. Yeah.
They have a combined 104-5 record, which is unheard of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you've got more recently, you know, the Harbaugh brothers, John and Jim, coaching against each other in the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
The Manning brothers, Peyton and Eli, both Super Bowl winners themselves at quarterback. The Williams sisters, Venus and Serena, they've got, you know, dozens of titles between them and all sorts of things, including the Olympic gold in doubles 3 times.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't realize that many. I knew they'd won gold. I forgot that they'd won 3 of them. Wow, those are some good names. Because, you know, it's not easy. As you guys know, you got a brother that's really successful. You know, like the all-time home run hitting brothers in baseball. And I don't want to poo-poo this, because to me, if you made it to the majors, that's something. But, of course, it's the Aaron brothers, because Hank hit 755, and his brother Tommy hit 13. Give him 768 total. So, you know.
That one perhaps a little more lopsided.
Yeah, a little more lopsided. The Negro brothers in baseball won 539 games. That's a little more balanced, Phil and Joe Negro. But, you know, it is. It's you look at, you know, father and sons jump out, like in baseball. I know you're a baseball fan, you guys. Bobby and Barry Bonds and the Griffeys, senior and junior. You know, we got basketball, Dale and Steph Curry. You know, but it is an interesting thing when you find two brothers that have had that much success. But you came up with some good ones there, the Klitschkos and the Williams sisters. Yeah, find sisters that have done so well.
That's perhaps even more rare than brothers, just because, you know, being a professional athlete as a woman is just not as common as a man, just because there's not as many sports out there.
Yeah. Do you guys have a favorite brother combination out there that you just enjoyed watching play, Scott? Ben, just throwing some names out. I was thinking of the Gronkowskis. You know, I mean, Rob, obviously one of the great, if not the greatest tight end ever. But he had 2 other brothers. They all played in the NFL. A lot of people forget about the other 2 Gronkowskis.
Yeah, I didn't know that until I researched it last night, that there was actually a trio of them.
Yeah.
For me personally, my favorites would probably be Justin and BJ Upton, just because they're the most recent that I can think of.
Yeah.
You know, both in the 2020 club in their careers, both going to play for Atlanta, I believe.
Yeah. And I believe that they both hit they reached their 100th home run plateau within like the same day, within like an hour or so of each other, I believe.
Yeah.
I forgot who hit the first one to get 100, and then his brother comes up like an hour later in another game and gets his 100th home run.
Wow.
And people are saying, isn't this a horse racing show? Well, of course it is. But, you know, you think about great horses, how many of them sire great horses? I mean, it happens. It's kind of rare, maybe more rare than in the humans. You got Gallant Fox, who won the 1930 Triple Crown, sired 1935 winner Omaha. You have the great Man of War. Some consider him right there, maybe even a step ahead of Secretariat. Some will make that argument. Most say Secretariat. It's kind of like the LeBron and Michael argument in basketball. But Man of War sired 1937 Triple Crown winner War Admiral. American Pharaoh's off to a terrific start with his first crop, doing well last year. Who knows? But it's not easy for greatness to beget greatness, and certainly not for like two brothers or two sisters to both have just incredible success.
I mean, finding success once is tough enough.
Yeah, one does well. That's pretty good. By the way, the Stevens brothers have over 10,000. Right behind them are Greg and Chris McCarron. So they won 7,141 races. So that's how dominant the Stevens brothers have been. All right, some great info and some fun just to talk about other sports and other family combinations. And when we come back on the Horse Racing Show, we will be talking with Gary Stevens and Scott Stevens, only right here. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice, and a reminder, one of our new sponsors, West Point Thoroughbreds. If you're interested in horse racing partnership, it's one of the most affordable, smart, and fun ways for a new owner to get involved in this exciting game. And the place for that is West Point Thoroughbreds. Over 875 races that they have won, over $53 million in purses. Since 1991, Terry Finley, retired Army captain, graduate of the U.S. Military Academy, has been putting together syndicates bringing people into horse racing. If you're interested, please give them a call at 518-583-6638 or go to westpointtb.com. Tell them you heard about it here on the Horse Racing Show. That's West Point Thoroughbreds. That's the only way to get involved in the game. Well, we were talking earlier about brother combinations in sports, how rare it is to find two that have had great success. We have two now. They have won more races than any brother jockey combination in history. Over 10,000 between them, 5,000 wins between them here each. Scott Stevens just recording his 5,000th win a few weeks ago. And Gary Stevens, the Hall of Famer, of course, who is retired with over 5,100. And I think the world of Gary, we go way, way back. Scott occasionally talks to me, and they're both going to talk to me now. So, guys, welcome into the show.
Thanks, Ken.
Thanks
for
having
us.
Well, first off, let me ask you, Scott, what was it like? You're approaching 5,000, and I'm sure everybody's saying, when are you going to get 5,000? And Gary's going to drive over to see you. What was that moment like for you at Turf Paradise just a few weeks ago?
You know what? I'm glad I got it over with. I think I've only rode 3 races since I hit the 5,000 because of the virus. But, it seemed Gary flew or drove over here on the Wednesday prior to me hitting it, and I was hoping to get it done that day. And he says, I'm just going to wait. He says, maybe you'll do it on Saturday. And I said, Gary, there's no guarantees in horse racing. And it was pretty special for him to come over. I wish I could have did it that day, but I'm just glad I got it done.
Were you as nervous for Scott getting his 5,000th win as you were when you got your 5,000th?
No, not really. He didn't know I was coming in. I went into the jocks room, and he was playing cards as he does every day before the races. I think that's his most important part of the day, and I got a feeling that's one of the reasons that he rides is so he can get in there and play racetrack rummy every day. And I walked around the corner, and he had a mask on and rubber gloves playing cards. And it was before the pandemic was announced as a pandemic. We just knew that the virus was going around. And I said, what the hell are you doing? He said, this jocks room, it's a dirty place with a lot of dirty guys in here. We all had a laugh. And he was pretty relaxed about it. And I just told him, I said, I want to see how you do under pressure when he asked me what I was doing there. But it was fun to go over there but just before he did it. But, I don't think he was that nervous. His girlfriend and his son and everybody had taken off work for about three days. I think he was more bothered about that and wanted to get it over with for that reason. So if there was any pressure, that was the pressure he had.
Well, first off, I guess, Scott, we know that your hygiene level is higher than that of your brother Gary's.
It hasn't always been like that, Kenny.
It seemed that every winter here in Phoenix, the somebody catches a cold and we sit there and play cards, and before long, all of us have got it. And it was kind of a joke, me wearing the mask, but now I wasn't that far off.
You're ahead of your time.
Kenny, you know what? Through this whole thing, Angie, she mentioned to me, when I came back from Phoenix, and she says, since you've quit riding and out of that jocks room, you don't get sick near as often as you did back then. And I said, no.
We're talking about the jockeys room, and not that all athletes, they share a dressing quarters. I don't know if anyone's closer, though, than jockeys, Gary and Scott. I mean, you guys are right on top of each other. Everybody is in a jockeys room, and you're going back and forth and changing, and you got another race, and here's another race to ride. There's that would be a place that, and it is now, I guess, at Oaklawn Park and other places. Gulfstream recently closed that, had a lot of separation more than usual, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's really woke up management, and Scott was fortunate he didn't have to go in the sauna or steam room, and me when I came out of retirement, I mean, I basically lived in that sauna and steam room, and there's guys in and out of there all day long, and it's like a petri dish. One person passes a cold to the next, and it's just a revolving circle that goes on throughout the year, and hopefully they'll keep up some of the cleanliness protocols that they've started prior to these tracks closing.
Scott, as far as you
one
right
thing
now,
people don't. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
What I was going to say, one thing people don't realize, especially the smaller tracks where one trainer may have 4 or 5 horses in one day, and those silks are being used back to back. So I may be having to put silks on that somebody just rode the race before, which, I'm sure that's going to change a little bit now with the virus going around.
And they closed everything down, right? At Turf Paradise ended not long after you won your 5,000th win. And
right, they were over the next day.
Yeah. So I mean, they were closing anyway.
No, we were actually supposed to run in through Kentucky Derby weekend.
Well, I thought so, but I was just confused. So they closed down because of the virus, right? There was no consideration of running in front of no fans or any of that.
No, the last day that we raced was March 10th.
Just in time, right under the wire, Scott. Good move.
Yeah.
What was it like growing up? No, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that I'm glad it's over with. I'd hate to be stuck at 4999 right now. So.
And by the way, Scott is in Arizona. Gary's in California. I'm here in Kentucky. I don't know if anyone's practicing social distancing better than the three of us on this call. Do you?
No, absolutely not. It's kind of going on all over the place, and I know that you're experiencing it from your house with Nancy doing her telecasts out of her office, and it's the same thing in Los Angeles here. When you put on the news, everybody doing their shows from home, usually one person in the studio. So it's a different time right now, Kenny.
What's it like for you right now, Scott? I mean, are you thinking about going to Oaklawn? I guess that's the only game in town right now, isn't it?
No, I turned down a mount Saturday there in the stakes race, a filly I'd been riding here. With the protocol they had, I could come in and ride the stakes, but I'm going to be put in a separate room. There was no showers or anything, and I thought it was best for me to just stay put and not risk, being halfway across the country and them calling the races off. It's day to day at all of these places, I think.
Yeah,
that's
Kenny,
got to be a tough call.
Kenny, I talked to not only Scott about the Philly Booty Town that he was supposed to ride, but Mike Smith was named on Kimari for Wesley Ward, who wound up winning the stake race on the weekend, ran a hell of a race, and our valet from Oaklawn Park, Jody Piper, he'd called us and well, Mike and I, and told us of the new protocol, and that it sounds crazy, but the whole list is in today's Thoroughbred Daily News. That the jockeys, they can come in, they have no contact with any of the valets. If they want a valet, they have to hire an outside valet to saddle their horses. Once they leave the jockey's quarter, the quarantine room that has no showers, that does have a bathroom, TV, and food, they have to weigh on the scale out in the winner's circle. And then once they weigh, they're escorted to the horse that they're going to ride. And then after the race, the tack has to be disinfected before it can go back up to the top of the jocks room, brought back down. And once those jockeys ride their last race, security escorts them out of the racetrack without contact to any other person. So they're basically in jail when they go in there. No place to lay down, no place to take a nap. So it's going to be difficult for these jocks that are coming in for all these graded races that are starting up at Oaklawn Park this month.
And like Scott said, the biggest thing too, I would imagine, as you said, Scott, if by chance you went there and if they closed and if you can't get a flight back, I mean, you're stuck away from your family, 1,000 miles away in the middle of the country.
Right. It's, and they're not giving any warning. I worked horses a week ago Thursday for Jeff Metzer, Turf Paradise. I worked 3 of them. He put them on the van that night to go to Santa Anita. He had them entered, and then the races were called off at Santa Anita. When I heard the Golden Gate close the other day, I pulled him up on Equibase to see if he'd entered those horses, and all 3 of them were in at Golden Gate in the next 2 days, and then the races were called off there. So these horses have went from Turf Paradise to Santa Anita to Golden Gate, and they still can't race.
It is indeed the tough time that we're having now. We hope for better. We are certainly glad that we have the brothers Stevens on, over 10,000 wins between them. Stay with us here on the Horse Racing Show. More with Scott and Gary right after this. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Glad that you're with us. Hope you and yours are safe and sound. The ultimate social distancing interview right now. Gary Stevens is in California. His brother Scott Stevens is in Arizona. We're based here in Kentucky. And, of course, Gary and Scott, the winningest brother combination in the history of horse racing. 10,187 wins between them. Scott just winning his 5,000th race a few weeks ago, just before they closed down Turf Paradise because of all that's going on. Scott, did you think about this milestone? And, Gary had already gotten there and just what it means. No one else has ever done what you and your brother have done. When I won my 4,000th race, I never dreamed that I would make it to get to 5,000. So the closer it got, I started thinking about it. And, when I won the George Wolf Award last year, that was extremely special that the 2 of us were the first brothers to ever do that. And I think that probably meant more to me than getting the 5,000th wins, because that one is voted on by our peers, the other jockeys, and I was very honored to receive that.
And I was very honored to present it to you. To me, the George Wolf Award, Scott hit it the nail right on the head, and that 5,000, it's just a number. But I think Scott, he's been nominated for the George Wolf, I don't know how many times. Scott, you were saying, man, why'd they nominate me again? This is getting embarrassing. And everybody on that list every year is well deserving for not only on track performance, but them as a human being on and off the racetrack. And Scott is the epitome of that, and respected throughout the United States. He's ridden it probably more tracks than I have throughout the world. He's hit everywhere, small, big. One of the coolest things was he was in for Derby Day a few years back to ride one, and then also Belmont Park Stakes Day. Scott came in to ride one a few years back as well, and that was pretty cool. Having him in there on that venue in the jocks room and spending the day with him and him seeing what was going on. Those are great memories.
Yeah, you guys mentioned the George Wolf Memorial Award, of course, the high standards on and off the track of a jockey. It's only a one-time presentation to a jockey. Both the Stevens brothers have won it. I think most people know George Wolf died at 35 in a spill at Santa Anita in 1946, known for Seabiscuit. I'm trying to remember, Scott, the guy that played George Wolf in that movie, Seabiscuit. Did you think he was a pretty good actor?
You know what? He did a hell of a job. I'll have to give him credit. He did one heck of a job. He always had a little knack for that, though. He could get anybody, so.
So he would be the one that would grab the microphone first if the brothers were being interviewed, you're saying?
Yeah, but the only problem was that day when I got the George Wolf Award, he's the one presenting it, and he's going to give the little speech. And I thought, well, this is great. I'm not going to have to say a whole lot. And you know what? He broke down. He couldn't talk. And handed me the mic, so I've got to be the one talking. And he had me so choked up, we were both crying.
Well, Gary, I know many times you've told me about the admiration you've had for Scott in our private conversations when we've just been hanging around or when we're working together at NBC. But, you know, what has Scott meant to you as far as what you've learned and just handling yourself as a jockey?
Well, I've got two big brothers, and love them both dearly, and they taught me a lot growing up, how to fend for myself, how to be tough. But Scott took me under his wing. I don't know if so much under his wing. I was probably a pain in his butt, but taught me everything I know about race riding. And, you know, no matter what level you're at, being a jockey is a competitive business, and we have to learn to ride hurt, play hurt, because the competition is so tough. And if you take off on a day and lose a mount, you very rarely get them back. And the same goes with coaching. You know, every sport, every athlete has a trainer or a coach to help them out. And when you're riding at the highest level, you don't get a lot of help from people. And from the day I started right through my last week of riding, my last Breeders' Cup, we would talk. And Scott would give me constructive criticism. He'd give me, compliments when he thought I'd done great. And, clear back going to winning colors. Scott had worked her when she was a baby, when she was a 2-year-old down at the old Klein Ranch in Del Mar and Rancho Santa Fe, actually. And when I rode her the first time, I think it was the second time, and I reached back and hit her right-handed, he'd called me on the phone, and I think the race was televised. He said, man, that filly don't like the whip. He said, if you're going to hit her left-handed. And even when I was coming down the stretch in the Kentucky Derby, you'll see me switch my stick into my left hand in that last 1/8 of a mile, 16th of a mile. Same thing in the Kentucky Derby. And that was all Scott Stevens, not Gary Stevens.
Scott, what was it like when you guys...
Too much credit.
He's giving you a lot of credit. I don't know if you know all the credit he's given you. I've heard many times he speaks of you. So when you guys are growing up in Idaho, when you turned pro first, I believe you were a teenager, and then Gary comes along riding quarter horses around 14 or so. Was there friendly competition right off, or did everybody just kind of do their own thing and let's see how it goes?
It was definitely friendly competition. You know, I'll never forget, my dad was training some quarter horses for a guy in Utah, and I think Gary, he had a liking to the guy's daughter, but
you heard, there was two sisters. Let's get this right.
Anyhow, Gary, he went down there. They were going to have a race meet, and he was going to go help the guy. And he called a couple days later, and he says, "Hey, I need to know how to come out of the starting gate." And I said, "What do you?" He says, "I'm going to ride this weekend." And me and my dad got on a plane and flew down there and watched him ride. And I think he crashed on about the second one he rode, an 870 race. The water truck was broke and the dust was so bad. I think he flipped heels, but he won on the second or third horse that he rode, and he was a natural. You know, he gives me credit, but Gary was a natural on a horse, and his determination has been there since he was 5 years old, and he was diagnosed with the Perthes disease. There was nothing he couldn't do.
You know, most people, people will know that, but I don't think even a lot of hardcore horse racing fans know, Gary, how tough that was. Scott just mentioned it. We're talking with the Stevens brothers here, the all-time winningest jockey combination. And a young Gary Stevens, you had to wear a leg brace because of the hip problems, and your brothers kind of teased you, but you told me once before they pushed you. Nobody gave you sympathy is probably why you bounced out of it and became a great rider.
Yeah, Kenny, they never ever teased me. It was the other kids that would tease me. And, I learned how to ride a bicycle with that leg. I tried to play football. I learned how to run with that brace. I'd swing it out to the side, kind of a hop, skip, and run sort of deal. But it didn't slow me down. And luckily I was young, and I didn't know how serious it was. I knew I had to wear that brace, and I couldn't put any weight on it. So they were my protectors, and they taught me to stick up for myself and not take any crap off of anyone. And I think they went overboard on that thing, because I still I've got a quick temper, and a lot of times I've never
known that about you, Gary.
Well, Scott's the complete opposite. He doesn't tip sideways too often with his temper, but when Scott does blow his temper, you don't want to be around. It's not a pretty sight.
Do you have a favorite race of Gary's, Scott, that you just thought it was just extra special? And I know that's asking a lot with over 5,100 wins of his. Was there a race or two that you thought, wow, that's just really something?
When he won the Derby on Winning Colors, that was probably, I got as much of a thrill out of it as he did. I was so proud of him. I was riding at Louisiana Downs when Winning Colors won the Derby, and that will always go down as, that's every rider's dream, is to win the Derby. And when he got to do it, I was so proud.
Hey, Gary, what about Scott? Is there a race or two you remember about him right off where you said, well, look at my big brother. Look how good he is?
Well, the thing I remember the most that is like yesterday. Scott started riding when he was 15. And by the time he was 16, he was leading rider at Le Bois Park. And I used to sit up in the top of the grandstands, up in a corner. It was just like at the 16th pole. And I could tell the way Scott was sitting on a horse, 5/8 of a mile out or a half mile out, if he was going to win or not, or if he had horse. And he was riding great tactical races clear back then. We'd mostly been raised with quarter horses, but he had a knack for thoroughbreds. And then Dad's barn was right about the 5/16 pole on the turn, and I'd go up there and stand and watch those horses coming in to the turn. It wasn't a bull ring. It was a 6 furlong oval with mile turns. So they had very short straightaway and backstretch. And it was really cool to sit up there and watch those guys jockeying for position and watching Scott and seeing him coming out of that turn, see a hole develop or not develop, and where he was going to go, if he was going to slip through on the fence or go around. And that's clear back when I was 14, 15 years old. But watching him, I knew that's what I wanted to do, and I'd go out there and watch him every weekend and every Wednesday.
We're talking with Gary Stevens and Scott Stevens. They won 5,000-plus races apiece. Our special guest today, we're going to talk more with them in just a moment here on the Horse Racing Show. And this reminder, West Point Thoroughbred, you're looking for horse racing partnership, looking for something affordable, something where you can have fun, go to the racetrack and have a horse of your very own, sharing it with your friends or people that become your new friends. Well, the place to go is West Point Thoroughbreds. They've won over $53 million in purses. You can contact Terry Finley and the good folks at West Point Thoroughbreds at 518-583-6638 or go to westpointtv.com. We'll have more of the Horse Racing Show. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. So glad that you're with us. Gary Stevens, Scott Stevens, our guest today. No brothers have ever won more races than the Stevens. And recently, Scott just won his 5,000. So you're only like 187 now behind Gary. Are you going after him, Scott? Are you going to be the new record holder in the family?
I just hope I get to ride again. This little vacation was good for a while, but I'm ready to go to work.
This has got to be the longest you've ever been off.
Yeah. I've had a few injuries where I was off a while, but I think this is, I've been taking the summers off. I stay here. I did it for the last 3 years. When Turf Paradise is over, I stay here, and I end up flying somewhere about every weekend and riding a stakes race. So I've been taking a break in the summertime, but I'm ready to ride right now. So
how many horses did you work this morning, Scott?
I work 2. I'm just working enough to stay fat. I work 2. I'm on the every other day basis.
Yeah. So that
my house is starting to look good though. I've been painting on the house, so I'm getting a lot of things done around here.
How's the house coming along?
It's looking pretty good, but when you're using a 4 or 5 inch brush to paint your whole house, it's going to take some time.
Kenny, I've been in the tree trimming business here at my house with a handsaw. I think it's driving my nuts, my wife nuts, and my gardener came out last week, and he said, "What'd you do to these trees?" And I said, "Well, I'm bored." I said, "I'm just doing a little bit of tree trimming." He says, "Well, you need to stop." So
that is going to be the tough thing. The other jockeys, you guys talk, I know you have friendships with other jockeys. I mean, most everyone's in the same boat right now, and it's just it's a situation where you just hope that everything gets better and, some normalcy resumes for all of us to get back to work.
Yeah. Go ahead, Scott.
Well, the problem, like here at Turf Paradise, the horses have to be off the grounds on April 30th. And, that could end up being a problem. There's a lot of these that go from here to Canterbury or they go to Emerald Downs. And, they're not talking about opening those barn areas up. The earliest would be May 1st, and that keeps changing. So I could see there being a big problem. We've still got about 900 horses on the backside here, and the track's open. It's open 5 days a week. It's closed on Wednesdays and Sundays right now, but they are able to train. But, once April 30th comes around, if these other tracks don't open, I don't know what's going to happen.
And Kenny, that's a situation everywhere. I read this morning where the backstretch tentatively at Churchill Downs will open up on the 28th, and that was originally the spring meet was to start on that day, and they said that they would start, but according to the governor, they can't set dates right now, but they're going to try and open as early as possible. But my point being, all those horses that were at the fairgrounds are still at the fairgrounds. All the horses, there's many horses from Oaklawn Park that will go there, Payson Park, Gulfstream. I mean, spread out all over the place. And these trainers, they don't have anywhere that they'll let them ship in right now. So it's a problem.
Let me ask you, Scott had mentioned it briefly there about being laid up with injuries. Have you guys ever talked to each other when you had an injury so bad that you thought maybe it's time to retire? Because I know you both have thought through injuries. Gary, I was there in Arlington that day. I think it's around 2003, wasn't it, or something, when they had to airlift you out, and what a scary moment that was. But I just wonder if there was ever a time where the Stevens brothers talked and said, we've done pretty well, and we're getting banged up, and maybe it's time to hang it up.
Yeah, 2003. Actually, I wasn't airlifted. I was lucky enough that there were paramedics there that day. They saved my life.
That's right. Yeah.
But Scott was airlifted out of Canterbury several years ago. What year was that, Scott? Uh-oh.
I'm back.
What year was that that they airlifted you out at Canterbury?
2010.
Yeah, so I privately thought about retirement a couple different times, and I did retire. This is my third and final. But when Scott had that wreck at Canterbury, I got a phone call from Dad, and whenever Dad calls me at night, and I knew Canterbury was running, and I knew something bad had happened when I picked the phone up, and Mom was crying, Dad was pretty upset. Scott went down in one of the worst wrecks I've ever seen. When I went back and watched it, and he was there, lifted out, and he had some bad stuff. He pretty much broke everything from his pelvis up. And I tried to talk. I didn't think he'd ride again, and Scott can tell you from there. But I was hoping he'd quit, and that's been 10 years ago.
Yeah, Gary was pretty upset when I told him I was still going to ride, and at the time he was retired, and then about 6 years later he decided he was going to ride again. So he knew why I was still riding. I mean, this is what we do. So
the pride of Caldwell, Idaho, the Stevens brothers. What influence has your dad had over the years on you guys just getting started and continuing on in this business?
The biggest influence he had on us was they always had a horse for us to ride. And, I can't thank him enough for that. We had horses in our backyard. We had horses at the track. And he was our biggest fan. I think back on him, how hard it must have been for him when both of us were riding, when he was going to decide who was riding which horse. And he didn't care one way or the other, whoever could ride the horse. And there was a little friendly competition there between me and Gary when my dad was leading trainer in Boise at the time. He had about 40 horses, and we had to separate who was going to ride what. And it was pretty even. We each won our fair share.
We each won our fair share, but Scott was first call rider. Let's make that clear. But he started riding a lot of horses for a guy named Lynn Milton. He'd ride some horses for Kenny McReynolds. They both had good stables, so that opened things up for me. But that was one of the reasons I left Boise. Is I think I was second leading rider to him the second year that I rode, and I was always going to be second leading rider. I wanted to be leading rider, and I wasn't going to be leading rider in Boise, Idaho, because I was Scott's little brother, and that's why I left. I wanted to go somewhere where I could be leading jockey, and it took me a while and I think my first title was at Portland Meadows, and from there things went really well for me. But having a big brother, I don't know how Scott handles it. A lot of people for a long time thought that I was Scott's older brother, and he doesn't do things like Gary and this and that. Well, they didn't know the whole story. So he's always been humble and handled it pretty big, and been my biggest fan, I think.
I think
For
you might
sure.
be Scott's biggest fan, yeah.
Yeah, vice versa, exactly. So,
well, guys,
yeah.
I can't thank you enough for being on this show today. And Scott, again, congratulations on your 5,000th win, joining your brother. These Ortiz brothers, they might have a shot in like 10, 12 years. Would you come out of retirement, both of you all, then, to beat their record?
No, I'd like to be. I'd come out of retirement to be one of their agents, either one of them.
Exactly. And yet, the one thing you talk about the brothers winning the most races, you got to remember that Russell Bates has a brother that rode also. Neither one of us has won as many races as Russell alone put together. So.
Yeah, Kenny, we talked about that a couple of days after he had hit 5,000. We were on the phone, and Scott said, you know what? He said, I don't think that we're brothers that have won the most races. And I said, man, you might be right, because Russell won more than us put together. And then his little brother, Dale Bays, he had to have won at least 1,000 races. He was
he had a very good career himself, yes.
Okay, now we'll have to get the Bays brothers on. See, this is how it goes.
Good luck.
Have them on because I'd like to know what they're doing.
Well, I think Dale is in Kentucky, training and breaking babies. He's been doing that, prepping them for sales for the last few years that I know of. And Russell nobody hears from him. Nobody knows what he's doing. He has not, to my knowledge, showed back up at a racetrack since the day he took his tack out of there.
Well, all I know is from all the records I've read and reading in the Blood Horse article recently, the Stevens brothers, 10,187 wins, are ranked number one at this moment. And congratulations.
Thanks, Kenny.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
It's great. We'll have to do this again, guys. You all stay safe, and hopefully everybody gets back to business real soon.
Yes.
Stay with us.
Kenny.
More on the Horse Racing Show right after this. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Here's a reminder. A lot of people are binge watching things. I've had some friends ask me, I enjoyed that Michelle Phillips episode that you guys had on, or when the NFL Super Bowl winning coach Bill Parcells was on, or Wayne Lucas, or Bob Baffert, or John Velasquez. Wow, we've had so many great guests. This is episode number 62. If you'd like to listen to any of the other episodes, you can simply go to YouTube, and you'll see a way there to click on and watch the videos all over again. And when you do, we appreciate that. And let us know what your favorite episode is. You can tweet us at Horse Racing Show or check us out at our horse racing page on Facebook. This is episode number 62. Gary Stevens and Scott Stevens, our special guests today. And be sure to keep it here for more information about the Horse Racing Show. We'll be back with some closing thoughts right after this. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show, episode number 62. Thanks for checking us out. Glad to have with us Gary Stevens and Scott Stevens on. They've won over 10,000 races, 10,187. Scott recently winning his 5,000th. Glad to catch up with the Stevens brothers. Gary and I go so far back. Okay, so Thomas Kenny, you said you had a few more brother combinations you wanted to throw at us out there in the sports world.
Yeah, my father would be cross with me if I didn't mention the Bush brothers of NASCAR, Kurt and Kyle, with a combined 48 Cup Series wins and a championship. They're definitely the go-to brother combination in auto racing.
Ooh, yeah, good combination there. We were talking about Ben Chaffins has a favorite brother combination in the coaching world of college football.
Well, being here in Kentucky, you can't get away from the Stoops brothers, because you got Mark here at UK, and then his brother Bob was at Oklahoma, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, and Mark has been a guest on our show because he owns some horses. How about that? See, it all comes around to horse racing. We'll bring it back there anyway. We have practiced our social distancing very well today. Thomas is at his house. I'm at mine. Ben is at the studio. Scott is his house. We had Gary from Los Angeles and Scott Stevens on from Phoenix. So I think we've all been safe today, don't you?
Absolutely.
It doesn't get much further than that.
The big question is going to be the Preakness officially announced this week it's been postponed. When it's been postponed to, fluid is the word. You'll hear it a lot. It's not an excuse. It's just right now no one from the people I've talked about at various racetracks around the country, everyone's in the same boat. They're waiting to see what's going to happen. It's impossible to make a definitive statement this time, other than we're all hopeful the first Saturday in September will be the Kentucky Derby. And if all goes well, the first Saturday in May this year will be the Arkansas Derby. Well, we're glad that you're with us again. Ben Chaffins, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Thomas Kenny, thank you.
My pleasure.
Scott Hall had to depart right quick, but he'll be back again next week. We'll be back with episode number 63. We do appreciate that you tuning in again this week. Thanks to West Point Thoroughbreds as well. Check them out if you're interested in getting involved in the horse racing game. So that is it for this week in horse racing. We hope that everything clears up for all very soon. Until then, we'll talk again next week. I'm Kenny Rice. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the Horse Racing Show.